transformation of Indian settlements, in addition to working on heritage protection, management, and interpretation. So without any further ado, please welcome architect Soumi Chatterjee.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Asmita. Thank you, Shari, for this platform. Let me just share the screen. I'm just taking a moment to seep in everything Sharmila ji was talking about, because that fight is far more real. And to all the designers who forego designing, keeping disability in mind, remember, we'll all go there one day. We will all grow old, if not anything else. It's going to be difficult. Can you help me share the screen? I think you have to enable participant or something.
Yeah, I did that.
You did.
Yeah.
Share screen. Okay. Sorry, I'm still not very conversant. And a little bit about myself. No, I'm not an activist. So if there's anybody who know me, they will know that I'm not an activist by a mile. I work completely under a very technical frame of mind. And where I come from, this particular presentation is based on one project and one competition which two of my ventures had hosted. From Creative Footprint, we were preparing codes for Indian Railways, and one of the mandates was to look at if we could fight climate change, or by abating carbon footprint, by reducing the carbon footprint through conservation, and if we could just about quantify it. The other experience was we hosted a competition where we wanted to shift from towards a greener community that is more walkable, more public spaces, more open, just by getting people to change their basic everyday life, small actions. If spaces can make a difference, and that itself graduates towards some abatement strategies. So that these are the two particular experiences which I will be sharing. But here's one thing is, my presentation is more like question and answer, because I think over the last 1 year, we've had enough of one-way dialogues. And we're always wondering if we can be heard, and we are asking, can you hear me? So instead of seance, let's share experiences, then it's a little more fun. I'm going to touch upon almost all the goals, because they are all interconnected at the end of the day. So if we are looking at a person who's aging and a building who's aging, the only difference rather is this entity cannot talk, cannot literally stand up for itself, but can be of service to meet all of these goals. Let's broaden our frame of mind, and I will be breaking it down into small doable actions, so that at the end of the day, we can choose our battles carefully and we can follow through. It is about following through. The chord that joins the entirety of the presentation will be historic buildings. So all these steps, but how does it relate to historic buildings, and how can we make historic buildings actually address most of these? Can you relate to this diagram? I hope everybody can relate to this diagram. That the point of this presentation is we play the role of either one of these. And what I do understand from all the participants in today's presentation, we are all urban elites mostly. We have the privilege of a roof over our head. We have the privilege of a job. Our job is technically not at stake because of natural resources. We're consumers in a way. We're neither floodplain dwellers. Maximum, most of us are probably inconvenienced by flood. I'm not sure if any of us are fish workers or anyone deal with pisciculture, or any of us are farmers. We are in that urban elite category. We have this touch and go system. We dispose easy, we buy easy, and we move over easy. But then the question is, why is it that we, as this urban elite group, need to bother? Because we can only answer for ourselves and keeping heritage in mind. Can any of you point out that what is it that makes, just as a common parlance, that what is it that really makes historic building sustainable? Or is it really a myth that is historic buildings, sustainability of historic building is expensive, or that we are consuming natural resources, so anyway it cannot be carbon neutral, or it really cannot be sustainable? Does anyone have a take on this? Is it just that we are dealing with existential value, or something to do with climatology, or better building material? What is it that you understand by the value of historic buildings? And I can show you some pictures for reference, but yeah. Which of these do you think really matters so far as sustainability and enabling a historic building to justify its existence?
Please, anyone can unmute themselves and go have a discussion, please.
Shairi, what about you? Why don't you be the conversation starter? I see Madhuchanda. Madhuchanda, you read out something to do with heritage. Which of these do you think really matters? Yeah.
I guess probably when these heritage buildings were made, they were like way back, and there were not much scope for, more carbon and more pollution causing stuff, if I'm not very wrong. There were very pure products being used, and whatever was used was rock solid and stuff. So maybe they might have a chance of being sustainable.
Anyone else with another answer?
So could you actually sort of repeat the question? Like, what exactly are you asking?
Why do we say that, okay, this historic building or conservation by itself is green, is really sustainable, or it has, if you conserve a building, you're checking those sustainability boxes that this is going to make tomorrow better.
Obviously, because you're not using new products to build something which is there. There is something which already exists, and you get to use it. And primarily, there are a lot of passive design architectural, parameters which used to be there as part of the olden architecture. So all of that taken into consideration. I mean, these buildings were sustainable to begin with. The fact that they've lasted so long with the construction material, with the design, with all of that in place. And obviously you don't have to build anything new. There is something which exists, and you can use it you can repurpose it for, like another function, perhaps.
Okay, Tanushree, that's a very nicely put clinical answer. Yes. Of course, that goes without saying that you're not building anything new which reduces carbon. The assumption basically is that because it's as built, it's supposed to be zero embodied carbon to start with. But remember, when you're using material, the material that we use to conserve the building are all extracted from natural sources. If you look at the upfront cost of conservation, it's quite high. I have two old houses. One of it is about a little older than 1857. So it actually dates around 1890s. That's where my parents are still there. When I go back to Calcutta, I still live there. And another one which was built around the 1910. Yes, we do have some advantage that it's naturally ventilated. I still don't require an air conditioner. But ask the person who's living in that house, the day-to-day challenges of maintenance is huge. The cost of maintenance effectively becomes a lot. And all of these buildings that we see, they're not really very old. They're between around 1900s and mostly after 1900s. Yes, they will last at least another 50 to 70 years, subject to a certain number of conditions which have to support conservation. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of additional reasons to conserve these buildings. Some of these you may agree with, some of these you may not agree with, because once I start picking out each of these cases and talking about it, probably you'll say it's very difficult to do it. I'll just tell you some clinical figures as to why people say this heritage conservation, adaptive reuse, maintenance happens to be green. One is, of course, this is going to help us combat 0.8-degree warmer because we can cut back on at least 36% of greenhouse gases. But it is also a fact that most of our historic building stocks are not in the state or have not been maintained in the state to actually meet these figures. These figures are ballpark and at a global level. To put down these figures in actual level and to be able to come up with our own statistics. These are gross statistics, we will never match them. And let's look at another benefit of this. So this is the assumption that embedded carbon, because historic building is as built is zero, if you were doing routine maintenance, you can lengthen the usable lifespan. Now the word usable is operative. As long as it's usable lifespan and the building's health and occupant is safeguarded, yes, it's extremely green, it's sustainable. And it is definitely cost effective to achieve indoor temperature and comfort. If I were looking at all of these things very, very clinically, well, we are looking at refurbishment as the greenest option, new building thereafter, and then when you rebuild that new building, 75 years is maximum what your concrete building will last. It becomes an additional embodied carbon. Now, I'm going to talk about some case studies and some actionable points, instead of it being very broad points which are to be addressed at policy level. What as we, as technical people and as consumers, how can we change and actually allow a historic building to perform in this sustainable framework? That is something that we can do. So I'm going to be looking at some hit, miss, myths, and laziness. I see at least some of you are from Calcutta. Now, this is a building, what you do see on your right-hand side, this Calcutta bungalow, is a building which I think it was a residential building, 2 owners. Most of our historic buildings, unfortunately, suffer from this division of ownership. And a part of it was converted into a bed and breakfast. The other part of it is, they did not participate, the other half, the one on the right hand side. Can any of you point out if this is a hit or a miss or a missed opportunity, or does it really help this cause of sustainability? Because we may have architects in this mixed crowd of participants. So what do you think?
Aesthetic gets hampered, of course, in the first place.
अच्छा चलो makeup करवा देंगे. Not a big deal. A coat of paint is not a big deal, but is this a successful case of adaptive reuse which actually performs or actually meets a sustainability goal?
Does anyone want to take up this question? So just give it a try.
See, there's never any good answer. There's never any wrong answer. We are all fishing for an answer. Now, okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, Sharmila.
Yeah. Okay. The thing is, on one hand, we have some rehab on the left hand side, and the right is left as is. So you get to see, I would say, from the perspective of a bystander, that the right hand side becomes an eyesore, and the left hand side gets the cake. But is that true? Have we gone inside and seen what changes have been done there?
Yes, I've seen it, but here's the thing. Now, when conservation happens and you do this half and half kind of a thing, yes, eyesore, effect on street activity, these are lighter remediation. They can be fixed. But the problem that happens, which ends up shortening the lifespan of the building, is that wall, you have two different treatments on two sides of the wall. That wall will start getting damaged. Now, these are all load-bearing structures. So the usable lifespan, the amount of effort and the money that went into conserving one half of the building, had the other half participated, effectively that one building, you can't do half and half. That's the issue with where conservation of these buildings are concerned. You have to take up the whole unit. There is nothing called I have a cut on right and left side. I'm only going to treat the right side. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the effective lifespan, the intention of keeping it green, the intention of making sure that it is maintained, that is cut down significantly. We have to see in another, unfortunately, we do not calculate or we do not monitor the data. So we will probably not be able to say, okay, how much is the damage, which is essential. I hope the calculators start working and there are these data which is maintained. Now, some of the telltale signs which we will come up to note in a very short period of time, in the next 3 to 5 years, is when plasters start coming out from one side, or you see, a lot of fungus. People's eyes start itching. These are things we do not take a note of, things which lead to bad health. And again, we check out of a particular sustainable development goal. We look at each goal in a standalone manner. We have to start looking at it, the butterfly effect of things. So that's the irony of this one example. Let's go to the next one. Now, this is another adaptive reuse where the church went absolutely ballistic because somebody had installed a bar by reclaiming a cathedral, which was not under use, and placed a bar in it. Still adaptive reuse. Brilliant span, brilliant light. When you look at the financials, went off the roof, hockey stick curve. I mean, the thing an investor wants to achieve. Whereas what you see on the right, same, it's a chapel, but it has been converted into a community facility. It's a library attached to a school. It's open to all, makes zero funds. If you look at the cash flow, it's actually cash negative. But when this particular structure was in distress because of extra snow, when the roof fell down, the community came around to fund. They created their lottery fund to be able to repair it. That's the story of the picture, this one. Whereas this becomes, to some extent and to many, some sort of a social liability. I have no takes on alcohol. That is a separate thing altogether. But the issue is, if adaptive reuse or if the proposed reuse is only looking at the commercials of it, not the economics of it, where there is a social connect, we're losing half the battle. And we are again not meeting certain number of sustainable development goal again, because one of the criteria which makes it sustainable are the people's participation, how people keep it, next generation keeps it. By unfortunately making this into a pub, you do disassociate the 0 to 18 group, where the first time they start experiencing what their surroundings are, start building a sense of community, sense of place. So that's one of the issues. Okay. Then comes this issue. We have, all those of us who have historic homes, we have these two, extremes. Either we are visualizing, oh, there's got to be set up and, it's almost like a period room. We are stuck in a time frame. And the other unfortunate side is, it's a space, it's extra space we don't use. we don't know what to do with it. We keep it as a junk. The problem with both are it makes maintenance demand so high that it literally becomes a pain when you start removing and you start to maintain. It's so expensive that the whole this intention, what Tanushree was talking about, this thing of keeping it and the crafts, and it makes this whole process difficult. It's an impediment after that. But both these are like extreme ends. We do visualize these grand rooms and strike a middle balance. It's an everyday space. It's a building. It's built to be used. You can also have contemporary functions. Imagine the contemporary function and build with it. Change with it. All historic buildings, especially residential buildings. Today, the target is residential buildings because that is what changes the city's canvas at the end of the day and how we look at sustainable cities. These 15 minutes neighborhood and all these concepts which we are just hearing, this is where it starts. We need to start realizing how much space we require and what is the kind of electricity, what is the kind of power consumption space users, and negotiate. But I guess just like Sharmilaji's presentation, she was talking about the lack of patience and empathy, that's with our building. Is anyone else can give me a different picture? I would love to hear it. Otherwise, I'm going to the next one. Well, I loved these two solutions. Very relatable. Is that someone with a old house can relate to this picture? And can any of you point out why is it that this is a picture which we like to romanticize on? Like when we're watching a movie, oh, this used to be like that. My grandfather's place used to be like that. We romanticize. Like we can go hours. I'm a Bengali. I can go hours romanticizing this building. But when it comes to living with it, what do you think is the first thing which stops people like us from accepting it? Where do we stop? Why is it that it becomes so important or so easy to transact, break it down, and make a new flat out of it?
It comes down to money.
The mind.
It's only money that works in most cases that I get more money out of the entire structure.
More upfront money.
Although if I invest some money into the building, I could make it sustainable.
It's put the nail.
That is the whole point. That how much effort are you willing to put in? Because that's going to cost you.
Right. And that is a behavior which spills not only inside the building or also in the area around us.
Yes. Yes. All across. Your entire environment has to be in the same mood.
So when we go for these tours and we take this picture, or as like I said, that most of urban elites, we make presentations and prospective plans and all of this on almost a daily basis, we do put up pictures like this. We say, okay, this is the project, this is this, we sell our projects. Unfortunately, we really do not have an excuse to have a city that looks like this. While we know how to make it this, all they did, this is Charles, I think Prague city center, all they did, very small, apart from keeping it clean, etc. Instead of putting public toilets all around and a repetition of facility, a very small step, they shared their infrastructure. So you can walk into any of it and use a washroom. You can walk into any of these stores and use their dustbin too. So Let's by design start giving, especially in the historic cities, which are pressed for space, small intervention. Let's start mobilizing these smaller design solutions that talk shared facilities, shared amenities, and get things going. Because we're at the brink where you can't come back. Once it's demolished, it's gone. And all these lovely concepts of 15-minute cities, shaded streets, walkability, I can go on the list. It's all in our cities. Okay. Can you tell me this? This is a typical central South Calcutta rather streetscape. Even in North Calcutta, you'll find a lot of these similar homes. Today, when we look at planning parlances of sustainable cities and creative cities, etc., we look at this word called form-based codes as the most beautiful, enduring solution. We had it. We live in it. We have interactive edges in streets. It's about opening those windows and keeping life in them. It's about what we advertise, and it is about finding solutions and design solutions within these old cities so that not just the building, the surrounding of the building is addressed. For example, when we would not want to we would want to stay in our old buildings. We would want that romance. We would like our older cities, but the access to it, the need to start transitioning into vehicles, or rather the want to start transitioning into, or to be able to project a new or a modern time, a lot is a business decision. And as professionals, we have a role to play. Let's start advertising also the right things so that these historic cities, sustainable historic cities, stay sustainable. It's a professional choice. This one, another big part of accessibility and of course, sustainability happens to be keep public goods, pure public goods as public, because when it's public, you have more stakeholders. If you have more stakeholders, you're likely to have more shareholders, or at least 50% of shareholders, then it sustains. So if everything will become a niche product or a niche food or a niche restaurant, just because each of these historic buildings have to perform in a standalone manner, no give or take or support from the city, then every person, individual, becomes responsible to fund its sustenance. That is a framework, that is unfortunately a framework which does not work, or rather it becomes an impediment in contributing to conservation. So the shift from standalone buildings to a cluster or an area based, where there is a sharing of facilities and more number of shareholders, stakeholders become important. I have pictures of a school, that's Vishwabharati's pictures. It has more open areas. So instead of converting this beautiful school into, say, a resort, which of course will tick all the checks and balances in the books of accounts, by keeping it a school and trying to keep numbers aside, today if somebody goes and touches Vishwabharati in the wrong, or Shantiniketan in the wrong sense, or tries to talk anything else, there is going to be a backlash, which is a huge thing, that there's a sense of belonging, that there's an automatic community support. Again, when we look at cities, and especially Kolkata, we look at these older pictures, and now when we're looking at our cities and we look at the same picture, there's a sense of irritation that, please keep it clean. Well, unfortunately, this is the canvas. This is the city. This is the people. Somewhere we also have to get down from our high horses and not want to emulate something else, start accepting and start looking at this also as a solution. Eyes on street makes cities safe, keeps it walkable. Eyes on street. But it hurts our, I don't know what, pseudo ego or whatever it is. These are little solutions that actually help conservation, keeping cities humane. Another one is most of the cost, the higher cost that we pay when we are conserving buildings, happen to be for building crafts and material. If somebody really wants, then craftsmen are available, material is available, sometimes salvage material is available, which is a pro-conservation in its true sense. Funders are also available. It's about finding the right network. It's about not letting go. It's very easy to demolish and build something new. But to sustain building crafts, it means you're sustaining not just all those jobs related to material, knowledge, community, craft, environment, and the loop is endless. So we're looking at a never-ending loop. So circular economy via conservation, check. One of the things is, let's just keep our goals realistic, financial goals, plans realistic. When we break a building, get some transaction and think that this bank balance is going to last an eternity, it won't. Value of money dips. So otherwise, Mumbai would have been a very livable, or rather a very cost-effective city if letting go of building or built stock would have actually countered our livelihood-related issues. It does not. The costs spiral. You will have more number of sprawl. You will have to travel extra. So the expense, everyday expense, is only going to rise. I do not have a study which really validates this, so I will not harp on this anymore. But I really wish somebody from a real estate perspective looks at this number crunching. But my gut feeling says this, because you're not going to be paying a lot of extra for peripherals, the cost of living will be countered. Another very small thing where we can really start with in conservation is choose the right fixture. One of the issues where we find is that additional water tanks. Everything in addition, you don't know what you need, but you want that latest gadget. Okay, not on a daily basis, at least 3 days a week. If we were to cut down certain number of demands, our historic buildings will sustain. Of course, apart from saving water, a bucket will not harm. Then goes, well, this coal versus solar energy, then conventional petroleum gas-based vehicle versus cycle. If not anything else, good health. Just, it's definitely a little more flexible. You don't have to wait for parking. Think of other peripherals. Just try a different solution, a solution that works for you. Moving to the cycle will also mean that you won't need a parking space, so you do not have to let go of that ground floor Boichak Khana or Otla and the other features that you have in those historic buildings to build a garage. And once you build a garage, there is no coming back from there. Of course, C&D construction waste in field is, and this is a problem which we do not want to see. Only when you have to literally salvage material, or you can't find it from Chor Bazaar, do you land up in these sites. But this too increases our cost to health, living cost, travel cost, everything that you can talk about. And it is very expensive to clean. So when you start billing in that, okay, we need environmental remediation for these areas, wetland reclamation, we don't have clean water, part of conservation. This is what we are dealing with. And we all go to these Rajasthan cities and old cities, and we take photographs. Now, it's not that they started with what we see it today. It was very difficult. Even when they started their houses, they also had the same issues that, we're looking poor, who will come here? These questions were always there. It took a good lot of 20-25 years to gain this confidence that no, this is what makes a historic city or a historic building special. It's about presenting what unique elements we have in our town. Therefore, more number of people will come and enjoy the city. So keeping these historic buildings will only add up to the revenue of the city, which means the cost of life of residents decrease because cities will manage to pay for a certain number of improved facilities. It's a whole cycle. And last but not the least, I think when we're looking at managing historic buildings and lifestyle choices, because I was looking at residential buildings, major issue that we find is junk. So choose your battle and start somewhere. Start using, don't carry back that plastic bag. Don't take that bottle. Carry your own water bottle or a cup or a straw. Just keeping junk aside. Try to either, if you are eating out on a daily, try to go to the restaurant, eat, at least it saves that plastic boxes and cartons coming home. Or if that's not an option, try a restaurant which gives you paper bags, which means at least this is recyclable, this is destroyable, biodegradable. Make a different choice. The other thing, cycling, I think we've heard enough. I think, Shari, somebody must have covered cycling for health and means of accessibility, liberation, and why does it check everything to do with sustainable cities as well. The last picture is rather of if we as people in the city are not using every space. For example, historic buildings always have these verandas, and one of the demands is, can you please close it and make a toilet or some usable room or extend it and include it? No, use the veranda, look out as it was supposed to be, because that makes this so-called form-based course, eyes on street and every other things count. You're looking at your city. When you look at your city, it will start maintaining itself because you won't look at garbage for long. So it all works in a cycle. Well, this is the reason why I was talking about urban elites and some kind of internal changes, because we cannot even imagine what the floodplain dweller, fish worker, we can empathize, sympathize, we're still there. But we're kind of the neck, the connection between the environmental minister or the industrialist and every other policy level intervention versus floodplain dwellers who are a different sector altogether. We are the ones who, in a way, caused the shift. And another picture, the slide went somewhere else. Just a minute. Climate change is not coming. It is here. Every 2,000 years, there's a shift in the wind pattern. That is natural. We're making it just a little worse. We're adding to it. If we were keeping the demand of construction and using the city as it was supposed to be, at least we will be able to cut back from the picture number 2. That's this, if not anything else. Yeah, so we don't have to really look how to do it. We can start changing something. Otherwise, it will be very soon as the next picture that we'll be asking for help. There will be no one for help. And I was looking at some statistics, but those statistics are mostly European Union based statistics. We are yet to find our statistics. If not for the reason of plant and environment, etc., for our generation, it's going to be very tough to pay bills in the next 10 years. It's already freaking expensive. So climate change really threatens economy. If we want our jobs safe, we better do something. Historic building is definitely a to-go place to start with. If there's any other questions, so we can do it.
Thank you so much, Shomi. I